The echoes of the forgotten. Jessica had always felt a strange pull towards the old, abandoned library in her hometown. It was a relic from a bygone era, its once grand facade now crumbling and overgrown with ivy. The townsfolk spoke of it in hushed tones, recounting tales of disappearances and inexplicable phenomena. But Jessica, driven by a love of history and an insatiable curiosity, decided to explore its dusty halls. One evening, armed with a flashlight and a notebook, she slipped through the broken gate and stepped into the dimly lit interior. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and mildew. Shelves towered above her, their contents barely discernible in the weak beam of her flashlight. She wandered through the labyrinthine aisles, her footsteps echoing eerily. As she reached the back of the library, she discovered a small, hidden alcove. Inside, there was a single, ancient tome resting on a pedestal. The book was bound in cracked leather, its title faded and unreadable. Jessica felt an overwhelming urge to open it. As she did, a wave of cold air washed over her, and the room seemed to grow darker. Suddenly, the pages of the book began to flip on their own, stopping at a particular passage. Jessica's eyes widened as she read the words, "Those who disturb the echoes of the forgotten shall become one with them." She tried to close the book, but it resisted, pulling her deeper into its mysterious grip. The walls around her seemed to warp and twist, and she could hear faint whispers growing louder. Panicking, she dropped the book and tried to flee, but the shadows in the library had come alive. They reached out with tendrils of darkness, ensnaring her and dragging her towards the pedestal. Jessica screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. Her vision blurred, and the last thing she saw was the book's pages glowing with an otherworldly light. The next morning, the library was silent once more. Jessica was gone, and the only trace of her presence was the ancient tome, now resting peacefully on its pedestal, its pages closed. The Harbinger. Michael had always been skeptical of the supernatural. As a journalist, he prided himself on his rationality and commitment to uncovering the truth. So, when he received an anonymous tip about a series of bizarre events in a nearby town, he was eager to investigate. The tip led him to a quaint, picturesque village nestled in the mountains. The locals were friendly but guarded, and Michael sensed an underlying tension. He began his inquiries, discovering a pattern of unexplained deaths and disappearances dating back decades. The common thread was a mysterious figure, described by witnesses as a tall man with hollow eyes, who appeared just before each incident. Michael delved deeper, uncovering old newspaper clippings and diary entries that painted a chilling picture. The figure, known locally as the Harbinger, seemed to predict or even cause the tragedies. Despite his skepticism, Michael couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. One night, while poring over his notes in his hotel room, he felt a sudden chill. The room seemed to darken, and he sensed a presence behind him. Turning slowly, he saw a tall figure standing in the corner, its eyes like empty voids. Fear gripped him, but he forced himself to speak. "Who are you?" he demanded. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it raised a bony finger and pointed towards the door. Michael's heart raced as he understood the gesture. He had to leave. Gathering his belongings, he fled the room and drove out of town, determined to escape the figure's ominous presence. Days later, back in the safety of his city apartment, Michael tried to rationalize the encounter. But every night, the figure appeared in his dreams, its hollow eyes watching him. He became paranoid, constantly looking over his shoulder, unable to shake the feeling that he was being followed. One evening, as he returned home from work, he found a note on his doorstep. It read, "You can't run from the Harbinger." The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. The figure was always watching, always waiting. Terrified, Michael moved to a new city, changed his name, and cut all ties with his past. But no matter where he went, he could never escape the feeling of being watched. The Harbinger had marked him, and he knew that one day, it would come for him too. The night shift. Emma had recently started working the night shift at a local convenience store. The job was quiet and uneventful, perfect for someone like her who preferred solitude. Her only companion was the store's security system, which provided a sense of safety in the otherwise empty building. One particularly slow night, around 2 a.m., Emma noticed a man standing outside the store. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in tattered clothes, with an unsettling stillness about him. He didn't enter, just stood there, staring through the glass with hollow eyes. Feeling uneasy, Emma checked the security cameras. To her shock, the man wasn't visible on any of the monitors. She glanced back at the door, but he was still there, staring. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to make sense of the situation. Summoning her courage, she stepped outside to confront him. "Can I help you?" she called out. The man didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. Emma returned to the store, shaken but relieved that he was gone. The following night, the man returned. This time, he was closer, his face pressed against the glass. Emma's fear escalated as she realized he was trying to get inside. She locked the doors and called the police, but when they arrived, the man had vanished. Over the next few nights, the encounters became more frequent and aggressive. The man would appear suddenly, sometimes inside the store, despite all the doors being locked. He never spoke, just watched her with those hollow eyes. Desperate for help, Emma confided in her coworker, Mark. Together, they decided to review the security footage. To their horror, they discovered that the man was a former employee who had died in a tragic accident at the store years ago. The footage showed him wandering the aisles, staring into the cameras and watching Emma. Realizing they were dealing with a restless spirit, they sought the help of a local paranormal expert. The expert performed a cleansing ritual, and for a few nights, the store was peaceful. Emma thought the ordeal was over, but one night, as she was closing up, she heard a faint whisper, "Emma." The lights flickered, and she saw the man's reflection in the glass door, closer than ever. Paralyzed with fear, she felt a cold hand on her shoulder. She turned, but there was no one there. The store's lights went out, and in the darkness, she heard the man's voice, clear and chilling. "You can't escape me." Emma's scream echoed through the empty store, her fate sealed by the relentless spirit of the night shift. The locket. Lena had always been fascinated by antiques. She loved the stories and history behind each piece. So when she stumbled upon an intricately designed locket at a small, dusty shop in an old town, she couldn't resist buying it. The shopkeeper warned her that the locket had a dark history, but Lena dismissed it as mere superstition. That night, Lena examined the locket closely. It was beautiful, made of silver and adorned with delicate engravings. Inside, there was a tiny, faded photograph of a woman from the early 1900s. Lena felt a strange connection to the locket and decided to wear it. Soon after, she began experiencing vivid, disturbing dreams. In them, she was the woman in the photograph, living in a grand but eerie mansion. The dreams were filled with sorrow and terror, and Lena woke up each morning feeling exhausted and anxious. As days passed, the dreams grew more intense. She saw glimpses of a shadowy figure following her through the mansion, always lurking just out of sight. One night, the figure spoke to her, its voice a raspy whisper. "You took what was mine. Now you will pay." Terrified, Lena decided to return the locket to the shop. But when she arrived, the shop was gone, replaced by an empty lot. Confused and desperate, she sought help from a local historian. He revealed that the locket belonged to a woman named Eliza, who had been tragically murdered by her jealous lover. The locket was a gift from him, and it was said that her spirit was bound to it, seeking revenge on anyone who possessed it. Realizing the gravity of her situation, Lena tried to destroy the locket, but it was indestructible. The shadowy figure began to appear in her waking life, haunting her every step. Lena's friends noticed her growing paranoia and tried to help, but the figure was relentless. One evening, while trying to escape the figure's grasp, Lena stumbled upon an old graveyard. Desperate, she dug a hole and buried the locket, hoping to end the curse. As she covered the locket with soil, the figure appeared, its form more distinct than ever. It lunged at her, but as the last bit of soil covered the locket, it vanished with a blood-curdling scream. Exhausted and shaken, Lena hoped the nightmare was finally over. But as she returned home, she found a note on her doorstep. It was written in an elegant, old-fashioned script. "Thank you for returning what was mine. Rest now, but never forget." Despite the haunting message, Lena felt a sense of relief wash over her. The nightmares ceased, and the shadowy figure no longer appeared. She tried to move on with her life, but the memory of the locket and its ghostly inhabitant lingered in the back of her mind. Months later, while browsing another antique shop, Lena overheard a conversation between the shopkeeper and a customer. The customer was holding an old, intricately designed locket, similar to the one Lena had buried. "This locket has a fascinating history," the shopkeeper said. "But be warned, it's said to be cursed." Lena's blood ran cold as she realized the locket had resurfaced. She left the shop quickly, vowing to stay away from any more antiques. Yet, deep down, she knew that Eliza's spirit might never truly rest, and that the cursed locket would find its way to another unsuspecting victim. From that day on, Lena lived cautiously, forever wary of the relics of the past and the restless spirits they might harbor. The locket had taught her a chilling lesson. Some objects carry the weight of history, and some histories are best left undisturbed.